This week on the agenda, boiling point. As extreme weather strikes across the globe, are climate catastrophes the new normal? From floods in Libya and China to drought in Sri Lanka, not to mention heat waves and wildfires across much of Europe and North America, the summer of 2023 has highlighted the devastating impact of climate change like never before. It prompted UN Secretary-General Antonio Gutteres to declare we're no longer talking about global warming, but global boiling. So what can be done if these climate catastrophes are not to become the new normal? With me now is Niklas Hagleberg, the Global Coordinator for Climate Change at the United Nations Environment Programme. July was likely the hottest the Earth has seen for about, I think, 120,000 years, leading the UN Secretary-General, as we heard there, to say that we've passed this era of global warming and that we're talking about global boiling. Is that why this summer has seen such weather extremes?
What we're seeing now is a combination of two parts. So one is the ever-growing concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And then we have just shifted from La Nina event that has been cooling the Pacific Ocean towards El Nino that started more or less in May. And that one is now causing the Pacific Ocean to increase in temperature. And those two events together has now led to the warmest July on record.
So let's talk about the science behind the ferocity in temperatures that we've been seeing, that we've been feeling. Is there any hope of reversing what seems to be a climate catastrophe?
So the kind of situation as we see it now with these events across the world from China to Brazil and US and Europe, we are likely to continue to see this in the foreseeable future. The good news is that we still have the opportunity, if and when we will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, then the climate can stabilize into a new normal, which will not be too far from the climate that our human society has got used to and that we have built up around.
I want to talk about the net zero goals and this goal of 1.5 degrees. Really, is that really just wishful thinking now? Because nearly 2 years ago, a UNEP report said there was no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees in place. I wonder if anything has really changed.
Well, so although it's still mathematically possible to keep the 1.5 degree alive, emissions are still increasing, global emissions that is, and it's only about 35 countries that have shifted and is on a stable pathway towards decreasing emissions. We do have a lot of countries that are still increasing their emissions, and they have not even stagnated. So it does not look too good for 1.5 degree, and even 2 degree, we have to really pull up our socks to deliver on that. But the solutions are available. So all the way from renewable energy to electric mobility to changes in diets to being more material efficient, the opportunities are right in front of us. We just need major political will, action from all individuals, from private sector to take this forward, and it can still be done.
Well, what impact will it have on the world if we don't reach that, if it's 2 degrees, if it's more?
Well, so there was a few years ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with its report about the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees. So at 1.5 degree global average warming, we are likely to lose about 50% of coral reefs. At 2 degrees, it's virtually 100%. So wow. You may know that these coral reefs, they really underpin, for example, the food bounty that we get from our oceans. So there's a big difference. And I would like to perhaps draw your attention just to the human body temperature. If you have a child whose temperature would be 38 degrees or so, you wouldn't be too worried. But add another degree to it, and you will be worried, and you'll take that child to the doctor. So it's a major shift that we're talking about between 1.5 to 2 degrees, and even the trajectory we are on currently, which is 2.8 degrees warmer world.
Do you think the world pays enough attention to climate change? Things like how all of that exacerbates poverty, gender inequality, the loss of livelihoods and so on.
Yes, it is frustrating to observe the pace of change. It's not going as fast as we need and that we indeed wish for. But at the same time, there's been a marked difference in, for example, the price of renewables. Only 10 years ago, we could not imagine a situation where renewable energy would be the cheapest form of electricity production across most of the world. Just a few years ago even, before COVID, we would not have imagined a situation where electric vehicles are topping the sales statistics of new cars in many countries. So there is a change underway. We just want it to be supercharged and that it picks up steam as we go forward.
Do you think it's supercharging enough to get people more laser focused on the upcoming COP28?
So perhaps in regards to COP28, so there's two parts to the climate situation, what we need to do. One is agreeing internationally to take collective action, so all countries together, and that's pretty much what COP28 is. They need to agree on how they deal with climate finance, mitigation, loss and damage, and global goal on adaptation, and so forth. So that's what they need to agree to. Yet, each of those negotiating countries need to also, at the same time, in their countries, implement policies, allocate resources, and take climate action. And this could be just the same areas that I just mentioned on renewable energy, sustainable mobility, shifting agricultural production, forest management, industrial processes, and so forth.
But at what point do you think the international community will say, right, we've talked about it enough, we have to have milestones in place, we have to have a fixed timetable to get things done?
Yes. Having been at these negotiations quite a number of years now, it is interesting how sometimes countries get down into the really details, and you can see their kind of negotiation tactics around it. So we are not quite moving as fast as we need to. Well, we are not moving as fast as we need to, but it's not an easy one getting almost 200 countries to come together and agreeing. Sometimes even if you think in perhaps your personal life, trying to just get the two spouses to agree on something can be difficult. And when you add a few children in there as well, it gets very difficult to move things move things forward.
There is still much to talk about, the detail to be ironed out. I wonder, though, if the state of affairs, it's just got far too big, and that maybe that it's just too late to actually make any meaningful change and tackle the climate crisis.
So here, Juliet, I would like to stress that every fraction of a degree matters. So the further we let the Earth warm up, the more we will move away from the climate that our societies have been built up around. So we can never give up on trying to solve this issue. So 1.5 is better than 1.6, 1.6 is better than 1.7, and so forth. So this is a battle that we just have to continue with, and our children, they will judge us on how we will do in this.
Niklas Hagleberg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hong Kong and southern China recently saw the highest rainfall in a single hour since records began in 1884. And it's not only been record-breaking rain, but record-breaking heat that's hit the country this summer, when temperatures topped 52 degrees in Xinjiang province in July. Well, with me now to consider what China can do to tackle extreme weather is Dr. Alex Fisher, Programme Director of Climate Ambition at the ClimateWorks Foundation. Dr. Fisher, now, China has had a summer of exceptional weather events, extreme heat for weeks and then months of rain, and then floods, sometimes in places that would never been at risk before. What's going on?
Let's think about it. What is happening to us in the world? It's the level of CO2 is increasing in the atmosphere. As we all know, this works as a sort of blanket. So through this blanket, our temperature increase or gets more extreme. The rain, the precipitation from the ocean goes up, and we just see more and more extreme weather events. This obviously will continue to raise for the next years to come. I would say, even though it's devastating for each individual and of course for the families who are most affected, but that's the new normal we face today.
Now, if we look at the last 10 years, these flood incidents have increased many, many times. Are things getting worse in terms of global warming, or are we all just getting much better at monitoring it and understanding the data?
That's a good point. Of course, news flowing around the world faster, so everybody can see it and everybody maybe has a feeling about it and is more affected. That's true, but the weather is changing. So if we look further, let's look back 1980s. That's where actually the bleaching of the coral reef started. There were the outcries from those affected communities in the Maldives, Australia, and around the world, India, who really try to get attention that something is changing. Then through the 90s and the 2000s, the level of CO2 emission in the atmosphere kept increasing and still increased today. So what we will see the next years and decades to come is definitely more change, and we have to prepare for it. And obviously we're doing, but it is the way the world is today. Sorry to say that.
And why do you think that climate change-driven extreme weather is a particular problem for somewhere like China?
First of all, China is the largest country in the world if it comes to population. Obviously, a lot of people will be affected. It's a huge country if it comes to geographic expansion and the territory. It has the droughts and the dry weather in the north and cold weather in the north. It has the heat weather in the south. It has the coastline, it has desert. China is like a microcosmos of the world itself. So obviously, we will have many affected areas, and China in particular will have a strong effect if it comes to the buildings, the stock, because we just built this in the last decades. And this will be, for some people and some families and real estate owners, a devastating moment where we have to adjust.
Yes, there's been death, there's been destruction. People have lost their homes, they've been displaced. We've had huge amounts of farmland completely waterlogged and unusable. So food supplies have been affected. What do you think the economic pain has been on the country?
Yeah, this is of course an important question. I mean, you mentioned also the social pain with the family. So this really comes first. But then the economic pain, it is worth to really calculate it and have an overview on the provincial level, on the municipality level, what is happening through climate change, and make this clear in the discussion in the communities, how to maybe change policies, how to change building standards, how to change infrastructure. If it comes to road, the tarmac on the road has to change so you don't have to repair it so often. So there's a lot of economic and social consequences from weather events. While having said that, it was always there. And you mentioned that earlier. Are we just reporting more? Yes, but also the weather events get more extreme. And I think that's what people have to prepare and have to adjust their living standards on municipality level, on provincial level, and on national level and the world.
So let's talk about what China's doing on that national level. Now, we've talked before on the Agenda programme about sponge cities to reduce waterlogging and to prevent floods. What else is being piloted and put in place that you think is particularly interesting?
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. Having lived in China for a couple of years, you can see a lot of changes, a lot of policies adjustment. First of all, on the national political level, they're doing a lot, and probably on the national level, they're already on the edge on what is possible, because obviously the next level will be then provincial and community level. And I think there is really some space for improvement, actually in all countries, also in Germany. So while the national level is pushing the provincial and the municipality level to take action, to be the leaders, and then also ensure their population what is the right thing to do. There's a lot of work to be done, and consumers have to be informed. What are the right decisions? Investors have to be informed. They have to take climate change into consideration. This all happens on municipality and provincial level, and the individual people which are sort of responsible for those decisions, they really have to take climate change into the daily decision making. I think there we can improve, but this doesn't only count for China, this counts for all of us in the world.
So let's talk about climate resilience. Now, at last week's Africa Climate Summit, leaders called for debt relief to help end the climate crisis. Is it as simple as that?
Put it that way, there's a debt stress, and taking this away obviously will help those communities and those nations, for example, Zambia and other nations where this just happened in a concerted effort between the international community, including China. Definitely is going to help Zambia and other countries if you take it away. Does it affect climate change measures and policies? Not necessarily. Except Zambia decides to change their investment structure at large. Otherwise, it just gives some relief. So it's a short-term measure, if you want to call it that way, and only will help to adjust to climate change if you change your investment structure afterwards and have a long-term perspective. Much more important, from my point of view, is the decision from the African nation to push forward on a worldwide carbon market where we align together as a world how to price these environmental externalities like CO2 emissions. And this will, of course, potentially have a long-term effect if the world agrees on a market system where those who polluting pay for those who are affected. And this will change, obviously, then. Why the debt relief has a short-term relief measure only. Thank you.
So you're talking then about this carbon tax regime. You think it might make a difference, but how likely is that going to happen?
That's a very good question, the $66 million question. What can I say? If the 54 leaders in Africa really put their political weight behind this, I think the rest of the world has to move faster. There's a commitment from the world to make it happen, but will it happen in 2050, 2060, 2040? I think that's what we discuss. While the African Climate Summit, we're pushing for 2030, which is for such a global system, of course, very soon. And if they really pursue that and make it a centerpiece of their political engagement in the climate change sphere, I think there's a chance that this could happen much sooner than we all expect.
Dr. Alex Fischer, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Still to come here on the agenda, how the European Space Agency is fighting back against wildfires.
Roger, read you loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and the crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming. I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with global business, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to The Agenda. Technology will have to be key to the world's battle against climate change. And one advance that could already be helping is the European Space Agency's World Fire Atlas. To explain, joining me now is Dr. Clement Albergel from the European Space Agency. Thanks ever so much for coming on The Agenda. Now, tell us about this upgrade to the European Space Agency's World Fire Atlas. How does it work and what's changed?
Thank you. The series of heat waves we are experiencing this summer across the world is accompanied by a series of wildfires, multiple wildfires from Canada to Turkey, all over the Mediterranean basin. To better understand those extreme events, we need observation. To better understand the variability of the climate system, how it changes, we need observations. Satellite Earth observations, such as those operated by the European Space Agency in partnership with the European Union under the Copernicus program, are particularly useful as they permit to scan our planet. They provide observations with global scale, uniformity, rapid measurement, and continuity. They permit to take the pulse of our planet. The European Space Agency World Fire Atlas provides a very detailed analysis of wildfire across the globe. It offers an insight into the distribution of individual fires taking place at both a national and global scale. Through its interactive dashboards, users can compare the frequency of fires between countries, as well as analyze the evolution of fires taking place over time.
So how accurate is the imagery and how is it processed?
So the World Fire Atlas uses nighttime data from an instrument on board the Copernicus Sentinel-3 satellite that measures thermal infrared radiation to take the temperature of the Earth's land surface. It is used to detect fire. Even if the Atlas cannot pick up all fires because of satellite overpass constraints, its specific spatial resolution and cloud coverage, it statistically represents 1 month to the other and 1 year to the other.
And the data that you are retrieving now, I mean, it's quite alarming, isn't it? Especially compared to 4 years ago.
Exactly. What we see is that even if period of intense heat can occur within natural weather pattern, we can clearly see that things are accelerating. If there is one kind of extreme event that we can clearly link to climate change, it is worsening heat waves. Heat waves are getting hotter. They are occurring at a higher frequency, increasing the likelihood of having sequential heat waves, and they are during longer. Human-induced climate change is boosting heat waves. In our data, we can see that heat waves followed by wildfire outbreaks are accelerating.
So you're getting a deeper understanding of what's happening and what's changing, but I wonder how the satellite service maybe can help civilian protection authorities and in cases of disaster, the international humanitarian community. How's it going to help them to respond to emergencies like we're seeing?
The Copernicus program, I've mentioned, has its own family of satellites, the Sentinel missions, developed by the European Space Agency. But it also has services. Copernicus provides a united system through which the vast amount of data provided by the Sentinels are fed into a range of thematic information services designed to benefit the environment. And these services fall into 6 main categories. One of them is emergency management. And one of the components of the emergency management is the European Forest Fire Information System, EFIS, which provides the most up-to-date information on the current fire season in Europe and in the Mediterranean area. And this includes 2 days meteorological fire danger maps and forecast up to 8 days ahead, daily updated maps of hotspots and fire perimeters based on satellite direct data. EFIS provides specific support to the Emergency Response Coordination Center in Brussels, which is fed with near real-time information along the fire season. And the information it provides, based on satellite Earth observation, is used by civil protection agencies, firefighters, to support decision-making on the ground.
So it does sound like this data is quite critical for forecasting. But is there anything preventative that we can gain from this technology?
We clearly need to develop advanced methods of fire forecasting to protect both human lives as well as ecosystem in the face of a changing climate. Current fire danger metrics have significant limitation. Most fire indices are calculated using daily temperatures, relative humidity, wind speed, and rainfall to simulate the moisture content of the ground. They lack a connection with real-time information about the amount of fuel, such as dry vegetation or flammable material that is present and susceptible to burning. Data from satellite Earth observation, such as those from the ESA Soil Moisture and Ocean Salinity Mission, SMOS, can be used as an indicator of a fuel quantity and moisture. And combining those data with actual fire risk index permits to improve the accuracy and timeliness of fire prediction on a global scale.
How do you see this technology being used in the future? Not just 5 years down the line, but further ahead.
Satellite Earth observation can be used to guide mitigation and adaptation measures, to assess climate risk and extreme events, to attribute those extreme events to their underlying causes, and to support climate services. They are particularly useful for efficient policy making and policy implementation monitoring. An example, as part of the UNFCCC Paris Agreement, all parties have to report the greenhouse gas inventory every year, the emissions and removals. And they are also required to submit their anthropogenic emission reduction goal as part of the national determined contribution every 5 years. And finally, all parties of the UNFCCC have also agreed to a global stocktake every 5 years, starting now in 2023, to assess the collective progress towards achieving the purpose of the agreement and to inform of further individual action to be taken by parties. There is a need to monitor the progress, and that's an area where satellite Earth observation can help. The current data capabilities, of course, and looking to the future, 6 Sentinel expansion missions are being studied to address EU policy and gaps in Copernicus user needs and to expand the current capabilities of the Copernicus space component. Measurement from the future CO2M mission will permit to reduce current uncertainty in estimates of emission of carbon dioxide from the combustion of fossil fuel at national and regional scale. And this will provide the EU with a unique and independent source of information to assess the effectiveness of policy measures and to track their impact towards decarbonizing Europe and meeting national emission reduction targets.
Dr. Clement Albergel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming up on a future agenda, the rise of the robot. Is the world ready for an entirely automated future? But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.